George has been instrumental in pulling a lot of people and organizations together and to start talking and having the conversation about electric vehicles and their arrival in Oregon. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to let George start and give us the update and give us the whole sort of paint the picture about electric vehicles and what this means for Oregon. Here's George.
Cindy, thank you very much, and good morning. I'm very pleased to be with you, and I'm presuming that we need to break by about noon today, right? So I'm going to go at this pretty quickly because I want to leave some room at the end for you to ask any questions or make any comments that you might have about this important subject. So let me ask you first of all, how many of you in the room came here today in your electric vehicle, in your zero-emission electric vehicle? This is the raffle winner right here.
Hybrid.
Hybrid's pretty good, so we'll give you a low five. We'll give you a high five. I came here today as well in my electric vehicle, so you did too?
No, I was a passenger in one.
All right, well, you get a quarter five. Good job,
And
thanks.
George, you get 5 more minutes. We started a little late, so 12:05 is what you get.
Well, you'll soon discover that I love to talk, so thanks for the extra 5 minutes. What I wanted to do, though, is run you through these really quickly. It's not one of those dreaded PowerPoints where I'm going to sit and read everything that's on the slide. You can read that yourself, and I'm glad to make the presentation available if you all want to provide it electronically or physically on your site. So this is public domain, and we want you to have access to this if you're interested. So we're going to talk today about some key things, notably about electric vehicles, different kinds that you'll be seeing here in the months to come, and a lot about infrastructure, charging infrastructure. It's a really big story, and I'll highlight that for you. I want to put a little strategic wrapper. I want to frame this. Why do we care about electric vehicles per se? And I'm going to, at the risk of editorializing with you slightly, I think that I want you to know that oil in general provides about 40% of the energy needs, not only transportation but home heating and industrial needs. So we have a heavy oil habit in the country. You can read those other PowerPoints, but I want to net out for you something that I think is really significant. Whether you worry about greenhouse gas and carbon emissions or not, and there's a lot of controversy around that. I'm not here to address that with you, but I can tell you the most compelling reason to care about the electrification of transportation is the fact that about $900 billion leaves our economy every year to pay the bills for the petroleum that we import. Now, some of it we import from our friends like the Canadians up north. But a lot of it, in fact, most of it comes from sources and from nations that are fundamentally hostile to our interests and that merely make us more dependent. So I'm here to tell you that one really good reason, other than the environmental ones, one really good reason is just to break that up and stop the hemorrhaging of money out of our economy. The other part of this little editorial is that we have to put in place military power in places like the Gulf of Hormuz and the Suez Canal, not only the money but the men and women who defend our interests and defend the movement of oil. So if that's important to you, then the argument or the case for electrified vehicles might become even more compelling to you. That's as close as I'll get to an editorial, but to me it's the stuff I worry about because I have a young son and daughter who may get the call to go serve in the Suez Canal or something, and I frankly hope not. The other thing we need to know, if you look at this slide, I'll net it out for you, is we're facing a lot of competition for the oil that remains, and no one knows exactly how much oil remains, but there is mounting evidence based on the known universe of data that we have kind of hit what some people call peak oil. What peak oil is that, you know, of all the oil we've been consuming since the end of the 19th century and through the 20th century, probably half of what's available to us in the beneath the surface of the planet has been found and extracted, and the easy part has been had. The hard part remains. It'll be much more costly, and the competition for it from China and from Western Europe and from India will be much more severe. So for us to presume that easy and relatively cheap oil is in our future is probably not the case. Have any of you ever used a carbon calculator before to look at how your vehicle performs? I'm going to just ask quickly. Cindy, you nodded your head. What do you drive?
I drive a Jeep Patriot.
A Jeep Patriot. So I don't have that in here, but you can look at the approximate configurations in here, whether you drive a Honda Accord or something like it, or a BMW or something like it, or a Toyota Camry. You can begin to see, and incidentally, I drive a Mini Cooper, a little tiny Mini Cooper. I drive it about 10,000 miles a year. It produces about 8,000 pounds of carbon contamination. So when you look at like a giant SUV, and I'm not here to judge it, but the amount of carbon that we Oregonians produce is, just in our state is pretty significant. Here's a question for you, pop quiz. Do you know how many vehicles, well, let me ask you first, do you know how many people live in Oregon at the moment, the approximate population?
3.5 million.
3.6 million people live in Oregon. Do you know how many registered vehicles there are?
2.5.
Higher.
10 million. 10 million.
They're not 10 million, lower. Okay, it's about the same. It's, when you look at registered trucks and cars, there's about 3.6. There's slightly more registered vehicles than there are citizens in our state. I can't tell you whether that's good or bad, but when you start overlaying the amount of carbon that gets generated by vehicles being driven around for legitimate reasons, I'm not challenging that, even for a small population state like Oregon, we're producing a lot of carbon. So that's, for some of you, that'll be another reason to look at a zero emission or a low emission vehicle like a hybrid or a pure electric vehicle. A couple of key points off of this slide. Whether you're a PP&L customer, Pacific Power and Light customer, or Portland General Electric customer, you probably have suffered and looked at your energy bill and you've seen that the rates have gone up and you go, well, that's pretty awful. How can this guy be telling us that electricity is relatively diverse and relatively stable? Well, in fact, it is. It's much more so than petroleum-based stuff. So the electrification of transportation is probably a better economic bet for us than relying on unstable petroleum. That's the point of this. The other thing I would tell you is we Oregonians are really lucky. About half of our power that we use in this state is generated from the dams of the Columbia, and that's a good, relatively environmental source of generation, and the amount of renewable generation in our portfolio of power options is improving all the time. We are far better off in the Northwest than, say, New England is. If any of you have paid rates there, you would know what I'm talking about. Okay. So today I want to just really net into this story. We're going to talk about charging infrastructure, electric vehicles and when they're coming, and how important, what we know about the attitudes and expectations of Oregonians, of our fellow Oregonians at the moment. And then we'll give you some time for some questions.